a debate, a forum, a get-together between State Representative Colleen Garry and Cathy Richardson, who's the chair of the Board of Selectmen in the town of Dracut. So you're both here, and John, pick a name. Cathy, Colleen.
I'm going to say Cathy.
Cathy, I'll see. This was not planned, so Colleen, you can object and put in a formal protest. I'll let you go first. I want to know if either of you have, or will, or know anything about, or want to put in a good word or a bad word for Dracut's decision with regard to the Greater Lowell Technical High School, because Tyngsborough apparently have said yes. And it looks like Dracut might be the key part of that. And I think education is an important part of what state reps do. But anyway, Cathy, what's your thoughts on that? What are you going to do? Are you going to get Dracut to adopt it, or are you going to take a neutral position? What?
Well, at this point, I think I will stay neutral because I really am interested in seeing what the people in town want to do. I think our role as on the Board of Selectmen is really to get the ballot questions to the people, similar to what we did with the high school project a year ago. So, I will stay neutral at this point. I think the way the Greater Lowell Technical folks...
Play with your microphone for a second.
Is it still?
No, it's not. Make a lot more around you. That's okay. Kind of drag him over a little bit more. That's good.
All right.
You're going to aim it a little bit more at your mouth and make sure you're good.
All right.
Okay.
Now you can start over.
There we go. I can start.
No, we heard you, but not now you hear.
All right.
Crackling?
Okay.
It was crackling. So I think the way the Greater Lowell Technical High School folks presented the information to us, and I think, Colleen, we sat a little bit too at the Tyngsborough town meeting. Really, the bottom line becomes that whether or not we believe their presentation, which I think is credible, that the repairs have to be done. And at this point, the MSBA has determined that they will give us 75% of the money back. And so the last quarter would be distributed among the 4 towns. Just in case the viewers aren't aware, the 4 towns would have to vote, all 4 would have to vote that their towns would go ahead and pay for the balance in order for the proposal to go through. So, I think the way they presented it, it certainly appears that it would make the most sense at this point to do it now with the 75% reimbursement. Otherwise, we end up with the $33 million to have to pay for in total, the 4 communities, and we would be assessed that basically because it has to get done, and the 4 communities would have to adopt or pay for that without the assistance from the MSBA. So I'm anxious to get to the town. I think that's where it needs to be. I think the town needs to take on that decision, and certainly from the board we'll get that onto the ballot and make sure that people have that chance to vote.
Colleen?
Well, I support the project. I think it's needed. Unfortunately, I think that Mrs. Richardson is trying to not really tell us whether or not she supports the project or not. She didn't hesitate when it was a ballot question to go to the town meeting about revamping CPA and taking back CPA funds. She voted for dismissal of the article. Mm-hmm. So she has made decisions prior to the town meeting, and I think that she's just trying to get around having to say which way she would support this. She has taken the CLT, no new taxes pledge. So obviously that means she would not support this because she would not vote for any new tax regardless of what it is. I think that's ironic when she herself wouldn't vote to let people vote to eliminate CPA, which I'm also in favor of keeping the CPA, but she wanted to dismiss it and not allow the people to vote for that. And she even said, my children might want to take that advantage of that in the future. So for her own best interest, she did not want the voters to vote to eliminate the CPA, and now she hides by the fact that she wants to hear what the people say on this issue. So when you're in the legislature, you have to make a decision, and you can't wait to see what other people say. You have to make that decision. So I'd like to know which way you're going to vote.
Okay, now I'm going to jump in because I'm going to ask another question, Cathy. But sure. You have the right to bring back this issue because Colleen did make a charge or two, and so therefore, but I'm going to try to keep it, I'm going to just throw something else on the board. And maybe what will happen is we'll just have both of you talk to each other. But I have been a little bit upset with Dracut over the years, and Colleen, you're the first one that'll answer. And it happened to me when I first started to do talk radio on WCAP. And I started doing talk radio in the morning on WCAP in 1999, so I was there for over 8 years. And I, for some reason, said something. I don't even know what I said. And all of a sudden, I was pro-Bill Zielinski. And all of a sudden, I found that I'm part of a group that, and so I never could figure out Dracut and its groups and its teams. I know in this race, you're the Democrat, Cathy's the Republican. Okay, that's fine. But I get to believe there's more to that in Dracut, that there's, meaning if you say hello to the wrong person, you're dubbed to be an enemy of somebody else. Do you have any comments on
Well, George, before you ask the question, okay? George always had an in with the old Greeks in Dracut. I don't know how he got
I don't
that.
know who the old Greeks were.
But George always had an in with the old, because I'd go out to like St. Francis Church or whatever, or whatever funeral, we ever have a funeral out there, and you'd be talking to people, and they'd say, oh yeah, George, he's got it in with the old Greeks out here. And that's,
My memory is
where are these old? Who are the old Greeks in Dracut?
don't
But they
know.
love you. They love you, George.
I don't know Dracut that much, but I know that if you're with somebody, you're against somebody else. At least that's what it appears to be. In fact, if my memory is correct, I moderated a debate long ago on CAP between Warren Shaw and Bill Zielinski, and I don't even know what it was about. It might have been the town taking over the water supply district. But I just felt that. Can you tell me about that,
There
Colleen?
are political factions
You
in
want to
town.
name names?
There are people who, against anybody who's friends with John Zimini. That occurred out of the Louisburg Square housing issue. Unfortunately, that continues today. That there was a line drawn in the sand in that.
So if
on
you
that.
like John Zimini, you're a Zimonite.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
So that has been the biggest issue, I think, in political, in politics in Dracut in the last several years, that ever since Louisburg Square, there has been a division, and it's unfortunate. And, I think that the big boys should get over it.
But this was 99 that I started on WCAP.
Well, there's always been. I mean, there was the people that were for Nick Lambros, people that were against Nick Lambros. There's always been some political issue, some person that somebody's been against.
He's the guy we associate with low water, right?
Yeah.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
Well, Cathy, what side do you see in Dracut?
What side?
Yeah, what side? Like we see the Zimonite. Would you agree there are Zimonites?
I would say that is true, that there are certainly people that consider themselves part of a group. I'm not sure about who is who and which group and that sort of thing. I tend to be, as chairman of the board, certainly, and as part of as chairman of Dracut Republican Town Committee, I certainly have much more contact with a certain group of folks. I would not necessarily say I'm part of a group, but I think that is the thinking in Dracut to some degree. There certainly are groups.
So are there any groups you can name other than the Zimonites? So
Okay.
you can't
The
put,
anti-Zimonites.
Yeah, I don't know.
I'm trying to put
I mean, I
George
hear
in
that
touch
term
with
a
the
lot, and I
old
don't
Greeks
know.
in Dracut. That's what I'm
I don't know. I do hear that term a lot.
Okay,
so.
I'm going to ask my question here, okay, what has to do with God, okay? And I'm going to ask Cathy first, and I'm going to ask Colleen, okay? Do you believe in God? What's your favorite church? How often do you go there? So
Okay.
that's going on first. So do you believe in God?
Yep. Can I can I do just a couple quick
I
questions
gave you the
first?
opportunity
And then
to-
can then jump
Oh,
into
yeah,
that?
sure.
Because I don't want to forget what we already talked about. But, so the CPA piece was, last year when we were trying to do the Dracut High School project, there was a thinking that the CPA tax should be eliminated so that we would make room basically for the tax on the high school, to support the high school. So my feeling was the high school project is a huge endeavor. It's a huge project that the town is taking on. And my own feeling was that the high school project should have stood alone on its own merit. And I think there were a lot of people that felt that way. That the high school project really should sell itself on its own merit and not be a barter, not be a trade-off, so that the CPA would then be taken away as a way to make room for the high school tax money. So that was my concern, that I didn't want it to get muddled. I wanted the high school project to have its own merit. It had a lot of steam. Clearly, the people were in favor of it. And at that point, I did say, and use my kids as an example, that there are lots of people my age, 50, 60 or so, that have property that maybe their adult children down the road would like to take advantage of, and I used my kids as an example. And so, because at that point there was discussion about whether or not the CPA was still valid to continue, because there was sort of no activity in that for that fund at that point. And so what I basically said was, it's hard to predict the future. We don't know. And I certainly at some point would be very willing to have it reduced back down to the 0.5%. I think right now Dracut does a 2%, which is, I think reasonable. But I also think it would be good to have it go back down to 0.5%, which is the minimum that the state can, that we can take out of for the taxes. So in that regard, that's why I did that, Colleen. That was at that point I really felt like the high school issue needed to stand on its own 2 feet. So that was that piece. And then you brought up the position about the Greater Lowell Technical High School staying neutral. The reality is that I did take the no tax pledge. I was endorsed by Citizens for Limited Taxation, which is CLT, and I'm very proud of that, because I think the way the government functions now, it feels like to the average person, and I'm not saying to everyone, but to the average person, that the state government seems to want to continuously take from us and needs more and more and more. It's a feeding frenzy to some degree. And I did take that pledge because I do want to go into the state legislature and not raise taxes. And the biggest concern I have with the way that we're going to have to do the Greater Lowell Technical Project in Dracut is through a debt exclusion, which of course makes the Prop 2.5 irrelevant in that regard. And so that's my biggest concern. I will absolutely vote to have it brought to the town. I would not be in favor of a debt exclusion, and I think people know that very clearly, because I think that's an additional tax on folks, and people are struggling now as it is. I'm not saying that the high school doesn't need the renovations. It absolutely does. And again, it's an old building. It hasn't had a lot of major capital investment in terms of the roof and that sort of thing, so it absolutely needs it. But it's hard for me as a Republican to swallow a debt exclusion, for sure. And John, you said about God. I actually visit the Christ Church United pretty often. Olivia's 6, so she's in Sunday school. I do believe in God. I think our founding fathers certainly did, and it's a huge part of our Constitution and our Bill of Rights.
So which church do you go to?
I visit the Christ Church United. I'm still a member at Elliott Presbyterian Church in Lowell. And I visit Christ Church now, and I think I'll probably at some point transfer over there, because Olivia's in Sunday school now. And
how often do you go?
To go. With the campaign, not very often, probably once or twice a month, not every Sunday for sure. But generally speaking, every Sunday if I can.
Okay, thanks. And how about you?
Well, I just like to go back for a moment. So
Yep.
I think it might be clear for people to understand, did you or did you not vote for the high school project debt exclusion? 2, if it was okay to get the vote to the voters on the vocational school, why wasn't it okay to get the vote on the CPA reduction to the voters?
Well, because I think it was 2 separate issues. We wanted the high school to get in front of the town, but I didn't feel it was beneficial to the town to do both at the same time. I really wanted it to be 2 separate issues. And I think at that point we also talked about the Conservation Commission and to get more information out to town, which they did over the summer. They had those presentations at Harmony Hall, and we really charged them at that point to be more active and be more transparent to the folks in town about what was happening with that fund, so people could then again look at it and make decisions about that specifically. So I think at the time there was a lot of information being sent out about the high school, and that was really the focus. I think it should have been the focus at that point, because we needed to make a decision in regards to the high school project.
But a lot of people felt there needed to be a decision on the CPA, but you didn't allow them to have that vote, and you still didn't answer, did you vote for the high school project?
We haven't done that yet. We're doing the vote before the meeting, before the town meeting.
No, the Dracut High School project. Did you vote for the high school project debt exclusion?
I voted to bring it to town meeting. Did I vote at town meeting for the high school project? No.
No, you didn't vote for the high school project. But you didn't allow the voters to vote to reduce the CPA.
Well, I'm going to jump in now because we've kind of changed.
Well, I think it's really about taxes, and somebody's going to be out there saying that she's going to do everything she can to keep taxes down. yet she wouldn't allow the people to have the opportunity to vote to lower taxes, because her children might be able to benefit from it at some point in the future, which they could actually benefit now because you have a life estate and they own the property.
Right.
So if there was a real interest, they could do it now.
Right.
But, you know, you can't hide behind these things. When you're in the legislature, you take a vote, it's up on the board, people know where you stand. So you didn't vote for the Dracut High School project.
In the voice vote. I voted to get it to the people, though.
Okay, but you
Right.
didn't allow it to go, the CPA to go to the people.
But I've already said why.
But,
Twice.
but you didn't allow people to vote for it.
Now,
And
Cathy
now-
doesn't have to
Correct.
answer the cross-examination
Well,
if she
you know,
doesn't.
I think it's transparency for the voters, and now you're saying that you're gonna allow the vote to get to the vocational, but you're not gonna support it.
I can't support
Personally.
a debt exclusion, no.
Okay.
Now, let's get back to God.
God, yes, I believe in God. Having been raised by a father who spent 9 years in the seminary, I would say that I was brought up thoroughly in the church, Roman Catholic Church. I grew up in St. Mary of the Assumption Parish, had several of my sacraments there, and then went to St. Michael's when we moved to Dracut Center, got confirmed there, and when my mom got ill, we ended up going to St. Francis because it was easier for her to get in and out of the church. And St. Francis is my parish. I have to say that I don't get it there as often as I'd like to. Unfortunately, in my job, I get to go to a lot of funerals, so I try to frequent a lot of the Catholic churches in this district. There's quite a few of them, and I would say that I'm unfortunately not as steady a churchgoer as I'd like to be.
I understand, thank you.
Now, John, I think you posed that question first to Cathy. Did you want to pose a question first to Colleen, or do you want me to go back
You just
to
keep
it?
going, lad. You're doing
Okay,
just fine.
wanted to. All right, well, I guess it's Colleen's turn to get the question thrown at her first, but this is probably an unfair question
Okay.
to both of you.
Okay.
But can you tell me one, just at least one, Republican you're supporting and one Democrat you're supporting?
Well, technically, we're parts of town committees where you're not supposed to openly support another party.
I understand that, but I've been doing that on the show, and I'm on the,
And you're not supposed to drive 70 on the highway.
I'm on the city committee in Lowell, and I have endorsed Eileen Donahue.
Yeah.
And I've endorsed Dave Nangle, and I'm a Republican, so therefore, you have a right to say you won't because of your position, and but I figured I'd ask the question.
Yeah.
I asked Eileen Donahue that, and I think she said she can't think of any, or some comment like that, John. I don't remember her exact words.
Well, I can definitely think of someone, but I would keep that as private. I would suggest, though, that I am the most bipartisan member of the House of Representatives. I have voted over 30 times against the House Speaker. I support what is best for my district. I look at every issue and I vote what's best for my district, not my party leadership. And as a matter of fact, if you look at where the Republicans line up with their Republican leadership and where I line up with the Democratic leadership, I believe mine was 84-point-something% with leadership, according to Beacon Hill, Bob Katz's Beacon Hill roll calls. And the lowest percentage of a Republican was someone with a 95.7%. So I am concerned that Ms. Richardson will just go along with the Republican cause, with the Republican line and her purpose of the party balance and all of that. I don't know how often she would actually vote with the Democrats, but certainly I cross party lines. I co-sponsor bills with Republicans. I have taken stands with Republicans on the Republican ethics proposal. So certainly I am the most bipartisan member of the House.
Well, Cathy, the question is, what Democrat are you going to vote for? Or, but you know, you can go off in any route you want.
Okay. In terms of a Democrat that I would vote for in this particular election, in my district, there aren't any.
Okay,
There aren't any.
all right.
And it's only because, you know, truly, I do believe in the Republican premise of the government. We need smaller government. We need to have a government that is less intrusive. We need less regulation, and we certainly do not need more taxes. And I think the Democrats that we have currently sitting as potential candidates or is sitting in those seats believe strongly in more taxes and more spending, and so I'm very concerned about that. So what was the other part of the question?
No, that was it.
That was
it. You know, you can take a few more minutes
yeah.
to expand on anything you want, because
Yeah.
I kind of started out with that rule.
Colleen had mentioned about the Republican caucus. There are 33 of us down there. There are 33 Republicans, and so it doesn't surprise me that the percentage is higher because there are less of us in terms of how often we vote with leadership. Part of what I do, certainly in my profession, is problem solve and try to cross bridges and and make situations that are better for folks, or make situations better for folks that are in a lot of trouble. And so I think I can bring that that skill set to Beacon Hill. I think it's not going to be hard for me to work with Democrats who have good ideas. It's what I do all day. It's what I do every day with people, and try to bridge gaps and make things better for them. And I'll certainly vote in regards to the district what's best for them. And I think, in terms of that, the biggest disconnect that people feel is that they're sitting representatives, again, that have been there a long, long time. And Colleen, this is not specific to you, but that people, that have been there a long, long time start feeling, or they feel that there's a disconnect between the constituents and the residents and those who have been in the state legislature in federal legislature for a very long time.
Well, let me interrupt and ask you your question, and you can go off in any direction you want, but I guess it's I feel as a citizen that the legislature doesn't do anything for me as far as the global issues. I like the fact we have casino gambling coming, but I feel more closer to my city councilors. What can you, Cathy Richardson, do for a Dracuteer there as a state rep? What can you make? How can you make their life different?
Well, I think that's a good question, George. I think what I'd like to see happen is to have myself be much more visible and accessible to the folks in town in Dracut and Tyngsborough. And I think, I can do that by a number of ways. I have thought about this and talked to some of the Republican folks that are in the House now to see if this is even feasible. But what I'd like to see maybe happen is do quarterly meetings with the superintendents and the police chiefs and the fire chiefs, so that we have all 6 of them in the same room and really talk about what the issues are specific to Dracut and Tyngsborough. I'd like to be accessible to the superintendents in both towns and the fire chiefs and the police chiefs on a regular basis. I'd also like to start neighborhood walks and really every month pick a neighborhood in each town and do those kinds of things maybe on a Saturday and have a coffee or have something where people feel like they can just come and ask questions and have some accessibility to me as their state representative. So I'm really hoping that I will be a much more active participant in the neighborhoods and in the towns in that regard. And the only reason I say that that's feasible is that I will be doing it full time. I have both of my positions. As you know, I work at Northeast Behavioral Health and the crisis team at Solomon Mental Health, and I also work part-time at Lowell Community Health Center. So both agencies know I'm running there, and they know that if I am fortunate enough to be elected, I will in fact leave those positions, at the end of November, 1st of December. So I will devote all my time to the legislative process.
Well, Colleen, how have you helped me and or Dracuteer, and how are you going to help?
Well, I'd like to go back to Ms. Richardson saying that she's been able to work with people. I would suggest that the very first decision she made was committee subcommittees. She announced them on a Monday, and by Tuesday, she had, according to her, there was a revolt, and she changed them back. When you're in a legislature, you have to make decisions and you have to stand by them. You can't be bowled over by the boys who now are so supportive of you. You need to be able to stand on your own 2 feet, make a decision, and stand by it. I don't know that you've been able to do that. You did the same thing on the boathouse. You voted against it. You had to reconsider it. Now you voted for it. I think that there's a lot of flipping back and forth. I have been accessible for 18 years. Prior to that, been very active in the community. I've been here my entire life. My entire adult life has been working on behalf of the communities of Dracut and Tyngsborough. I have had office hours every month for 18 years, except for the summer months when the library is closed. I have them on a Saturday, which is more accessible to people. For several years, I had a district office here when I was a chairman under Tommy Finneran. The extra money I received for being a chairman, I put into an office. I have to say, not many people came by. So that's why I don't have anything regularly here in the district. But if people call me for an issue, I'm there. I'll meet them for a coffee, or they can, if it's really private, they can meet me at my law office. There's no issue there as to accessibility. I think that that having regular things with the different boards, there's a fine line between being there to help them and being there as watching over them or putting too much into what they're doing. I don't tell local boards what to do. I'm there to get their reaction, what they want me to do. And I'm certainly always willing to go to any of those boards when I'm asked to do, when I'm invited to do so. But I am accessible. I do things for the community on a regular basis. I would say the short period of time that I was not as available were when my parents were very, very ill and when they passed away. Other than that, I have always been very visible and very active in the community and very accessible. I've had a website, I've had emails, I've advertised those, so certainly there's numerous ways people can contact me. I guess that's it.
Okay, now I guess I ask you, Colleen, a question. If I get mixed up, let me know. But I'm going to ask a very brief question right now because I think I know the answer, but I can't ask my question unless I know the answer. Are you pro-choice or pro-life?
Pro-life.
Pro-life.
Okay.
That's the one thing we agree on, I think.
Okay, so, well, we've got, all right, we've got that straightened out. But I'll ask the same question anyway. The reason and Colleen, I guess this is good that it's directed to you.
Yep.
The only reason I'm a Republican is because the Democrats seem to dislike pro-life people. And I finally said I'm leaving the Democratic Party. And of course, I find there's a lot of Republicans now that are pro-choice, which drives me crazy. And I was gonna, if Cathy had said she was pro-choice, then I would have focused my question differently. But you're both pro-life, but I wanna know, what good is it to be a Democrat or a Republican? Why do you go under the Democratic banner? Why do you go under the Republican banner? But Colleen, you're first.
Well, I think there's a basic, I don't go by all the tenets of the platform and all that. In my own view, being a Democrat means being there to help other people. And in my mind, I tend to think that Republicans are more do it for yourself, build yourself up. We don't, we did it on our own, you do it on your own. And my philosophy is you help others. That's just my own personal view of things. So that's why I'm a Democrat. Otherwise, I think the Democratic Party has gone very, very, very liberal. There are some of us who are conservative Democrats. I call them Tommy Finneran Democrats, who are on the line more towards center, more towards common sense. And I'm going to stay that way. I'm not going to let a liberal Democratic Party push me out of my own party. I stand by what I believe in, and that's the way it is. I think that it is important for someone like me to stay in the Democratic Party, to stay and say, no, there are conservative Democrats, and we will continue to do that. That's probably why I'm the most bipartisan member of the House, because I associate myself with some of the issues that the Republicans are pointing for, and I would say that the Democrats do seem to push people who are pro-life out. Any women's group in the Democratic Party is usually supporting pro-choice Democrats. So I get no assistance from them. But I'm still a Democrat, I'm still pro-life.
Okay, I don't usually do this, but I was going to do it. It's interesting you say you're the most bipartisan or one of the most bipartisan. That sounds like a Scott Brown thing.
It's funny because I had that first. And
you could have endorsed him if you wanted.
Well, it's funny because when I
just had to say that.
I had two slogans, going in the right direction and most bipartisan member, and next thing you know, Scott Brown had most bipartisan and Obama had going in the right direction. Okay. So I must be good at slogans.
Cathy?
Well, I mean, clearly, I've been a Republican since I was 18 when I first voted, and I voted for Ronald Reagan. I think was my first president that I voted for. So I've been a Republican my whole life, and I've been very active with the Republican town committee for many, many years. And primarily because I do believe that government has a place, but it has grown way too large. It's way too intrusive. The regulations we're over-regulating every segment of our society. And I just feel I have remained Republican for that very reason. I do believe in smaller government, lower taxes, and less regulation. And so those clearly are my biggest affinities to the Republican Party. And again, you know, I think the Democratic Party has certainly talked about the need to be liberal and to be caring for those who are less fortunate than we are, and that's true. I think there is a place for that in society. We need to care for those who are less fortunate than us. Clearly, I do that every day in my work at the health center and at the Solomon Mental Health. But it doesn't mean that we have to spend ourselves into oblivion to do that, and I think that's the problem. I think there has to be a balance. I think, you know, our churches used to be the you know, the way that people got taken care of if they were in difficult situations, or neighbors, and certainly as society has become more transient and people don't know their neighbors as well, you know, the government has had to step in to some degree to fill in some of the gaps. I think that's unfortunate. I think that's not, you know, the way it is served best, and I think it was illustrated by a friend of mine who went to Missouri recently, and a couple of folks had gone to when they had the tornadoes and that sort of thing. And in the Midwest, where I lived for a couple of years in the Kansas City area, the church, the faith community is still very, very, very active. And a lot of the things that used to happen here in New England before people got so mobile and so transient and had, you know, didn't know their neighbors as well, still happens in the Midwest. And it's very effective, it's very helpful, and I think it's unfortunate that we don't get the benefit of that here in New England like we used to. Although I have to say, Christ Church United, they do a Christmas dinner for folks who don't have a place to go. Elliott Presbyterian Church started the Thanksgiving dinner many, many years ago when I was very active there to help folks that don't have a place to go on Thanksgiving. So those kinds of things still happen, but not nearly enough. And again, the government has had to step in. But I think the government has stepped in and then expanded exponentially to a point where now it's not helpful.
Okay, John has signaled I've got to take a break. Right,
Yeah, because
John?
Colleen's battery died, so
Okay.
we're going to fix that.
All right, we're taking a break. We'll be back. Short break, so stay with us.
Thanks.
I'm gonna sit right down and write myself a letter and make believe it came from you. I'm gonna write words so, so sweet, they're gonna knock me off of my feet. A lot of kisses on the bottom, I'll be glad I got 'em. I'm gonna smile and say, I hope you're feeling better. I'll close with love the way you do. I'm gonna sit right down and write myself a letter, and I'm gonna make believe it came from you. Oh yeah! I'm gonna write words so, so sweet, they're gonna knock me off of my feet. A lot of kisses on the bottom, I'll be glad I got 'em. Oh yeah! I'm gonna sit right down and write myself a letter.
We're back on City Life today in Dracut, and we have with us the chair of the Dracut I was going to say school committee, the Board of Selectmen, Cathy Richardson. At least I didn't call you Sheila, because I've called you by your mother's name about every time that I've seen you. And we have State Representative Colleen Garry with us, and they both want to be the state representative beginning in 2013. Now I'm going to ask a question, and you don't have to take me up on this, but Colleen, one question that you can ask Cathy, and I'd rather it be a direct question, but you can comment somewhat, that you'd like her to answer before the voters go to the polls on November 6th. And this might be the last question you can ask her. Who knows? So there's your chance.
Cathy, you talk a lot about the regulations that are job killing and that we need to eliminate. Can you mention some of them?
Well, I think they come in the forms of taxes to some degree. I think one of the things I'd like to see really answered to some degree is what, well, let me start over. The regulations, I think, are in regards to small businesses. So we asked them to do healthcare, we asked them to expand on their employee benefits to some degree that they really can't afford. Those kinds of things are very hurtful to businesses. You know, for instance, the healthcare bill, I think we talked a little bit about that at the Sun debate. The healthcare bill, I think, is a huge problem, and just a couple of things about that. Then if we want to talk about specific regulations in regards to that, the healthcare bill, came across in less than 24 hours. It came across to be voted on. It was 349 pages, and so even Democrat Jim Maselli said that it was one of the worst bills he had ever seen, which from the Democratic State Committee, or from the Democrat Party's perception, that certainly would be an important benchmark, because Jim's been there a long, long time, and people seem to respect his opinion. And so it certainly seemed to be one of the worst bills he had ever seen. The Boston Business Journal said it was a Soviet-style health care, and the Moody's Investment said the credit was a credit negative outlook on the mass hospitals, and that it would actually cost jobs. Children's and UMass Memorial actually had layoffs directly related to the bill. That's what they said. It was directly related to the bill, and it's a $225 million tax on being successful, basically taxing people to be successful. And so Mass General is the number one hospital in the country, and it seems that we're taxing them because of their own success. And so I think regulations come sometimes in the forms of taxes, and I think the small business community and certainly the hospitals in regards to the medical bill, the healthcare bill, are really going to struggle with that.
So are you talking about the healthcare bill itself or the healthcare cost containment bill?
Correct, the healthcare cost.
The healthcare cost containment bill. And the fact that Jim Maselli was the only Democrat who voted against it.
He was.
He was the only Democrat to vote against it, and the Republicans voted for it as well.
For the healthcare bill, no.
The cost containment bill, a vast majority of Republicans voted for it.
But there were some that did not.
But there were some that did not, but the vast majority. So this was not this was a bipartisan attempt to rein in costs, where the highest level costs of any health care in the nation. With this, we are going to be lowering downward to the average now of what it should cost. At this point, prior to this bill, the money has been going to these research hospitals and community hospitals like Lowell General, was Saints Memorial, have been getting kicked to the curb to benefit the Boston hospitals, to subsidize Boston City and some of the other hospitals. And this was to regulate, to help get some of the money back to Lowell General and some of the hospitals that a lot of people in this region actually pay to go to. So it was a leveling off. It's a requirement. The insurance companies are making millions of dollars, and you're a big supporter of Charlie Baker, and Charlie Baker seems to be a big supporter of you. If you ask him what kind of health insurance money that they're receiving in their medical services, you'd see that's probably why he makes hundreds of thousands of dollars a year. I think that's exorbitant. That's why I joined with some of the Republicans on an amendment to look at the executives' pay at hospitals. I think it's absurd when you've got somebody at Lowell General who's running the place who makes over $1 million a year. That's absurd. That's why our cost of healthcare is gone up. It's not just the research that's being done. It's not just the teaching. We need to be able to lower the cost, because you talk about the cost of government. The biggest cost to state government is healthcare.
And that's true in the states, and that's true in the towns.
And that's why we have to rein it in.
and that's how we have to do that. That's why we gave the opportunity to the towns to get into the GIC. Dracut chose not to. There is a funding issue with the Healthcare Trust Fund. You know about that in town. It's underfunded by about $4 million. I haven't seen any leadership on that, according to your chairmanship. Something needs to be done with that. It's been going on for quite a while. But healthcare needed to be addressed. It was technically released overnight, but it had been in discussions for months and months and months. People had been involved in it and going to hearings and having meetings with the chairman. There was plenty of opportunity to understand all of the issues that were involved in it. And when it came time to vote, it was an easy answer to say, we haven't had enough time.
Okay, I think we're going to have, oh, good, because I want to ask Cathy to ask Colleen one question that you want her to answer before the voters go to vote on November 6th. And remember, this could be your last chance to ask Colleen a question like this. So this is your chance.
Okay. All right. Well, it has to do with the budget, and I think, again, we talked a little bit about this with the debate, and we talked a little bit about kind of the air that happens on Beacon Hill. You know, the backroom deal, so to speak, and the perception from the general public that there's a lot of things that happen on Beacon Hill that are not on the up and up, so to speak. And, you know, certainly the budget has been increased year after year after year. And, you know, Colleen, I know, you know, you have voted for those budgets, and I appreciate that vote, except for the fact that it continues to be raised every year, despite the fact that we say we're cutting and we're cutting and we're cutting. And so, you know, even from 2007 until now, the budget itself has gone up 26%. And so that's a huge increase, and despite the fact that we say we're cutting and we're cutting and we're cutting. And, you know, it's clear that things like the probation department issues a scandal, so to speak, for better, no other term to be used primarily, the scandal, you know, that continues to happen, and the budget, you know, local aid have been cut. I mean, with the exception of this year where it did go up, local aid had been repeatedly cut, and yet the probation department was getting more and more money, clearly for patronage jobs and issues in that regard. And so there's been at least 4 supplemental budgets in this term that have been passed. So again, you know, the feeding frenzy at the state level continues. And this is like the average perception, the average person's perception. The feeding frenzy continues at Beacon Hill. There's supplemental budgets that are passed and passed over and over again. How do you justify this budget continuing to grow and supposedly being the most austere part of the government? This is the leanest year of the government. We've sharpened our pencils, and yet it continues to grow, and even needing, to the extent of even needing supplemental budgets ongoingly to fill in gaps that people forgot or however.
Well, I'd be glad to answer that, because obviously you don't have the knowledge. I object to the air of what's going on Beacon Hill. At least you left the word corruption out this time. What happens is we pass an annual budget. If between the time that budget ends and the new budget before the new budget begins, there may be contracts that have been negotiated that have to be funded. There may be an extraordinary number of people going to transitional assistance, so for caseload, for that, or for DCF, that have to be funded. There are different needs, like in a supplemental budget, we've done special care for the, whether there's tornadoes or other kinds of emergencies that we've been able to help local communities. Those types of things happen in a supplemental budget. So occasionally we have supplemental budgets. We usually have a deficiency budget at the end of the year to finish up anything that was left over from the prior year. So it's not like we're saying, okay, we're drafting this budget. Okay, let's draft another budget. Let's draft another budget. These are issues that come up after the budget's already been passed, that there's been increased caseload or there's been an emergency need that has to be addressed. And that's what a supplemental budget is. Then they are rolled into the next budget accountability-wise. In regards to the budget increasing, as I said, healthcare costs are the #1 increase. Mm-hmm. They were expanding. Now we're talking about Medicaid and group health insurance for all of the employees. All of that is probably 20% of our budget. So if 20% of our budget is increasing what was the rate of inflation for medical health care, and you should have some awareness of this, has been in the past 12 to 14% every year. So if you have 20% of your budget increasing by 14%, then the budget goes up. We've had to cut back in all other areas. We have pensions that we have to pay. We have done pension reform to cut back on that. We've done the healthcare cost containment to try to rein in that 20%. We've had ethics reform to handle the things on paroles, on the probation department. We have had to squeeze in other things, to the point where the governor was going to cut back millions of dollars on Meals on Wheels for senior citizens. And I led the fight against that. We were able to restore that money in the House budget.
I know it's a broad question, but if you
So there are certain things that inflation does happen, and it happens to state government. Electricity costs, everything else happens to state government as it does everywhere else. And we are trying to rein in those costs. You said you wouldn't have voted for the healthcare cost containment. That is going to lower our amount of money that we have to pay on mental health, mass health, and that is a good thing, that we are getting under control. And when this is done, we will be one of the lowest cost health care costs in the nation.
Okay, it's worked out very well because everybody seems to be getting along, and we have kept the time pretty well. But to be fair, now John, did you want to ask a question? It's
Yeah.
Colleen's turn, I think, to, no, wait a second. I asked Cathy first, the last one, so it's Colleen to get it first this
And
time.
then I'll have my questions.
Oh, okay,
So
so
call in, get Colleen
No, I had
happy.
one question. She
Yeah.
had one question.
Yeah, I think we're okay.
We're even.
okay, but the question of, well, all right. If you both think you're even, then we'll
Yeah,
let
we
John
each got to
go.
ask one question.
Okay, what I want to ask is, this question to both you gals, okay? I believe most of our problems in Massachusetts is the lack of jobs. We all pay 5% income tax, okay? A lot of the flaws we see are around the border, okay? Well, look at all the magnificent jobs in Nashua. They just opened up a fantastic mall in Merrimack, and we're all going to go up there shopping. And if the state legislature could find a way to just make Dracut a tax-free town, sales tax-free town, you'd have a growth in business like no place else. Methuen, the same thing. Fitchburg, the same thing. Everybody who lives along the border, 10 miles in, sorry, that's where it is. But Rick is going to be mad, Lowell's going to be mad. Oh, we want to have that. If we could just be over in Drake, it would be great. I want jobs in Massachusetts, okay? You guys down at the legislature, whether you get down there, Cathy, or you're down there now, Colleen, okay, you need to make this happen. Because we need jobs, page 2. You need to, when you get down there, if you're lucky enough to get down there, Cathy and Colleen, if you can get their ear, tell them to promote Massachusetts businesses. If you can buy products made in Massachusetts, when you go shopping, wherever you might go shopping, food shopping, hardware shop, whatever you're going to buy, and if you can buy an air filter or whatever, and it's made in Massachusetts, I'd rather buy from a neighbor than and just look on the label. And so, okay, everything made at the Anthis company is made in Anthis is in Massachusetts. They make shoes. Go buy Anthis shoes. I just think that if we start to promote to buy products made in Massachusetts, made in New England, and maybe made in America, I think that'll certainly help our economy grow here and maybe blossom else. But I only care about our community. What they do down Cape Cod way and way up New Hampshire, I don't really care about.
So Colleen, you answer first if you would, please, and then Cathy.
Absolutely. I think that the border issue is a tremendous issue. We've been fighting it for years. The unfortunate part of the legislature is that it is a numbers game, and how many people are affected by it. New Hampshire border communities are the only ones that are affected by it. The sales tax is less here in all the other borders, whether it's New York, New York or Connecticut, or Rhode Island. They've got a higher sales tax. Vermont has a higher sales tax. So the New Hampshire border is the only one that really affects us. So we have been trying, but that 10-mile radius is always difficult because the person who's what 11 miles away says that's not fair, you're just moving the border to us. So it's something that we've talked about in the past, but we haven't had the numbers to get it passed. I would also suggest that I support businesses here in town. I had my signs made here in town. Unfortunately, Mrs. Richardson went to Lawrence to get them made. I think when you have a business in town, you should use it. And I think that's why I've had my printing done in town. I've had my signs done in town. I think it is important to shop in your district.
Okay, thank you. And Kathy?
And I do think jobs are the biggest thing that I hear when I go door to door, certainly from everyone. I mean, that clearly is the biggest issue in our economy, is a huge issue. And I did have my signs done in Lawrence, but I've had a lot of printing done right here in Dracut. So I do support local businesses. But as anyone else, anyone, you have to live within your budget, and so clearly I had to make a decision about the signs, but all the other printing primarily has been done in Dracut. And so, I think what's interesting is that sort of there's a rumor about the fact that we may actually be increasing the sales tax to 5.95. I've heard that number thrown around. The gas tax is possibly going to increase, and those kinds of things are being floated upon the legislature as we speak, and it's all to offset some of these MBTA costs and that sort of thing. And I think, the reality is that people are going to be less interested in opening businesses and hiring, and we see this nationally as well as right here in Dracut and Tyngsborough, when things are so unsure. And, Colleen, you talk a lot about the budget having to be adjusted because of inflation and emergencies and that sort of thing. We know that going into the budget cycle that there's inflation. We know how to calculate that and predict that. It should be already built into the existing budget. Things like the tornado, things like Hurricane Irene, certainly we can't predict those. But in the last supplemental budget of $45 million, the tornado and Irene were only $15 million of that. The other 30, there was a bunch of things in there about IT costs. There was some other stuff about mosquito control. Those things should have already been done. We've done this year in and year out, and those should have already been in the regular budget. So I am concerned when we talk about creating jobs when I think people in the business community are less likely to continue forth and hire and expand when they're not sure if the gas is going to go up, when they're not sure if the sales tax is going to go up, the income tax is going to go up. And there's just unsureness, unpredictability in the general marketplace. And I think that's where we need to be very consistent as legislatures and keep the tax rates down so that we are competitive. Things like the bottle bill, I'd love to see that repealed, truthfully. And so, I do think there's ways that we can encourage visits, incorporate tax credits or tax incentives.
Trying to bring it to a close.
Okay, tax credits, tax incentives, that sort of thing.
I need
really
to respond to her.
encourage businesses.
Try to make it quick.
Okay, Massachusetts has handled this worldwide recession better than any other state in the nation. We're only 2 states that have increased their bond rating, their credit rating. We have over $1 billion. We're only one of 4 states to have over $1 billion in our rainy day fund. We have cut over, in the last 10 years, we've cut more taxes than any other state. I'm sure that we didn't all expect the equine encephalitis or the West Nile virus to burst as much as it has in the last couple of years. That would be an emergency, and I wouldn't want to say to the community, oh no, we can't spray you because we already did our budget. And also, you've got a town budget, but you just did a police union budget. So was that figured into this budget before you passed it? Those types of things happen, and I would also suggest that a large number of Republicans voted for that substitute supplemental budget.
We're not going to have time for a closing statement, so I'm going to throw
Well,
it over.
I was going to say a couple of things.
Quick.
Sure. One is that the emergencies, I think no one is disputing the fact that emergencies happen.
Right.
I mean, clearly tornadoes, equine encephalitis, those kinds of things happen. It's the every day, every year, constant growth of government that just drives people to distraction.
But you wouldn't vote for the bills that would rein that in.
Because no, that's not true.
You
That's
said you
not
wanted to vote for
true,
health care.
Colleen. That's not true.
November 6th, please vote for me for state representative.
And I hope to be serving you on November 6th.
We got 3 minutes.
Okay, but then I'm going to throw something on the table and see if whoever grabs it, or you can interrupt each other. I want you both to bring the slot parlor to Lowell. What are you going to do for me? What are you going to do for me?
Slot ballot.
I voted for 3 casinos. I think Ms. Richardson might be in favor of 1. Is
I
that
said
it?
1.
I just
yeah,
want
I
the
did say
slot
one.
parlor to Lowell. That's
I
going to
did
be
say
Dracut
1.
jobs. So,
Well, that's true.
You gonna do it for me, Kathleen? Are you gonna do it for me?
That's
Colleen? Gee,
I would
did
say
so
one.
well
Start with
till
one.
I would get you one of those slut games. How's that?
Okay, thank you very much.
All right,
Appreciate
thank
it.
you. Thank you,
you.
John.
Slots
Thank you,
full.
George.
Okay, all right.
November
thank you.
6th.
Okay, thank you.